Sorry, hi Leadhead. Thank you so much for being here. You are the author or the owner of the Leadhead YouTube channel, where you make complicated, in-depth, and immensely introspective video essays, largely about narrative-based video games, but also stretching onto subjects such as films and occasionally music. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to be here. That's a generous description. I'd say that's more me when I'm at my best. A lot of what I do is sort of more the type of video you could find on other channels, like writing on games and stuff. There's only so many games I can go that in-depth on, so it's kind of like a weekly struggle of just hoping I find a game that makes for a really good Leadhead video, and then just doing what I can the rest of the time. But I make it work, for the most part.
Awesome.
Hot.
Well, I was going to say, I worry that you put yourself down there, because I think, while broadly speaking in terms of narrative-based video essays to do with games, in some ways there are similarities between you and other channels. I think you immensely differ in terms of how much you involve your personal experiences, to what degree the introspection of your life and compared to the games in which you're experiencing, which allows people to connect with you on a far deeper level, rather than videos which just analyze the games inherently without kind of external experiences.
Yeah, see, I just think that that's really important to the kind of stuff I want to do, because at the very beginning of my channel, I started out with, in my channel description, the very bottom, and I think it's probably still there, it says, games aren't toys. And this all arose from just, I don't know, spending a lot of time playing multiplayer stuff with friends and all that, and seeing I was sort of, I don't want to say taking it more seriously than they were, but sort of putting it on a higher pedestal than they were, I guess would be the best way to put it. And, I'm a big believer in the view of just art as a mirror. As soon as the artist is finished with it, it's no longer about them, it's about you, the viewer, the individual. And, if we're going to talk about games like they're a serious art form, which they are, I just think it's super important to give them that credit, that they aren't made so egotistically, and that they can be about you, and you can bounce your personality off of them and learn about yourself. So, I can't tell you what Metal Gear Solid 2 is actually about. I can just tell you what it's about to me, and I think that that's more valid than any, concrete, 100% objective definition or explanation.
I really, really like that. Okay, well, let's talk about in terms of solidifying the definition of games as art, and very much the games are not toys. Let's talk about a very serious one, actually, which you've covered, which is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Just for those who might not be quite as informed on the subject, do you mind telling us a little bit about what that is and why that is so demonstrative of this theory?
Well, it's an interesting case because it's a point-and-click adventure, and usually point-and-click adventures are... It's kind of like what FPSs became in, 2011 or so, where it's like, okay, at the time, this is just the default gameplay formula, and anything else you do, that's where you express yourself. But I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is based on a book by the same name by Harrison Elliott, I think. And basically, it's just this really dark story about an AI who's killed all of humanity and kept the last couple people who he really hates to basically torture them endlessly. And the game gets this across through what we call ludology, which is just enlightenment through gameplay, basically. Lud as in illuminate, lud as in play. And in the case of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, there isn't too much of that stuff. That is to say, there isn't too much of the gameplay syncing up with what the story is trying to get across, or what the thing as a whole is trying to get across, in your head. But there is a little bit of it. One example I especially like is that, I forget his name, but one of the last people you play as is the snooty rich guy who suffers from schizophrenia. And by this point, pretty much everything you've done in the game has sort of backfired on you in one way or another, and it's a multi-choice game. There are multiple paths you can play through and multiple endings, so you're really paranoid by this point that you're making the wrong decisions. And the game capitalizes on this at the end. The fourth character you play, this schizophrenic guy, the first thing that happens when you start playing as him is an eagle flies across the screen and just drops an arrow on the ground pointing you to go this way. And that's just completely meaningless symbolism. It's you got your head searching for patterns and deeper meaning and things that are completely random. So it captures that schizophrenia really well, and then it capitalizes on the fear and the paranoia you have about the game tricking you into making the wrong decision, because I bet you every single player, when they started this, immediately tried to go the other way from where the arrow was pointing. But that's not an option. You have to follow that arrow. So that's like a really good sort of basic but well done example of how, gameplay doesn't just have to be for fun. Gameplay can be there to create this sort of tension, create these thoughts in your head that are relevant to the thoughts that the narrative is trying to get across. Therefore, you have Ludo, play, narrative, story, harmony.
I really, really like that. It's funny because I was actually going to ask you a little later on to go into the definitions of that, because that's such a huge part of what you do. But you've smashed the nail on the head.
It's a very, very floaty term. I think that the correct term is ludonarrative synchronicity, but I don't like that term. It's not that it doesn't work, but harmony sort of drives home the art angle of it, which is exactly what I'm trying to get across. And I'm rambling now, but I always like to go to this example of, if you want a good song, the music needs to fit the lyrics, right? So something like When I'm 64 is a good example. It's this song about just being like hopeful about the future. So the music is da 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 da. It sounds so friendly and like optimistic. So the lyrics fit the music. And in the case of a game, the music is like the gameplay, the abstract part, and the narrative is the lyrics, the literal part. So those two things need to work together, and a lot of games just don't care about that, and you don't really get connected to the story or whatever the game's trying to do as a result. And that's where you get that famously pissed on term ludonarrative dissonance.
Why do you think that it is famously pissed on, as you say?
I just see it getting mocked a whole lot. Like, I remember, shortly after Folding Ideas made his video called Ludonarrative Dissonance that sort of exposed the larger gaming community to this idea. Like, not long after, Jim Sterling, who I love, I guess Stephanie Sterling now, made a video called, like, Ludonarrative Disco Biscuits or something, just, like, making fun of it and saying it was, like, a bad way of judging games. And from a critical perspective, okay, that's totally valid. Like, if a game isn't fun to play and, like, sucks and you hate it, who cares if it's all deep and artsy? Like, Gone Home would be a good example for me. I like some walking sims. I do not like Gone Home because it just feels so bad to play. I hate the way that just walking around feels, and therefore, like, okay, sure, maybe walking around an abandoned house finding notes is very relevant to the feelings you want the player to be having, but if just walking around doesn't feel good, then you don't have anything for yourself. And that's a perfectly fine way of objectively criticizing games, but, like, who the fuck wants to be objective? Oh, can I swear on this?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay, who the fuck wants to be objective?
Nice. Well, in some instances, it's going to go a little deeper than that, because, of course, it's not simply, in this instance, the walking, right, in Gone Home, because one of your most popular videos is about Firewatch, which, of course, for those who haven't played it, is a game, it's essentially a hiking sim.
Mm-hmm. And, I think you can make the walking simulator thing work really well. I mean, Death Stranding isn't a walking sim. I'll get into Death Stranding later. I'm sure it'll come up at this conversation. But an example of a walking sim with pretty good ludonarrative harmony would be The Beginner's Guide or The Stanley Parable, but that's almost to the point of not being a walking sim. In The Beginner's Guide, all you do is walk. You walk through the levels of a fictional game creator called Coda, who the narrator, Davey Reedon, who made the game, is talking about how he sort of obsessed over the deeper meaning of this guy's games and made him hate games, game creation as a result. It's sort of a big analogy for Death of the Author, which I didn't even know what that was until everyone in my comments said it was basically that. But, it gets across some really good moments in just the walking around format by having moments like, I forget what the game is called, the game within the game, but there's this one really great moment at the end, I think it's called The Maze, where you are just going through this big puzzle, and it's like the game itself was not meant to be finished, so the narrator just sort of gives you some shortcuts so that you can see the end, and there's like a moment where you just have to try like 10,000 combinations on a padlock, until eventually the narrator just says, screw it, I'll just show you the solution. Or another bit where there's this bridge or there's this maze with invisible walls, and it makes this horrible sound and teleports you back to the front as soon as you touch any of them. It's all this stuff that really says, like, get the fuck out of my game, you know? And it's being done in some big meta way in the beginner's guide, because it's a game within a game within a game, whatever. But say the maze was just a game on its own, that would be effective, if not critically fun, you know? So, walking sims are not inherently lacking any lootology, but I do think that in general there's kind of just a lower ceiling as to what you can and can't do within one.
It reminded me of the video that you made about Undertale, of which Toby Fox is critiquing people, particularly data miners, who go into the files and implementing his own, almost his own taunts at people who do that. As a way to break the game. And I thought your analysis of that was immensely deep, far deeper than others, at least on the subject, that I've noticed.
Yeah, it's that's a video of mine that sort of, at least in the comments, you get like a lot of snarky comments, which is understandable. I clickbaited the shit out of that one with the title "Nobody's ever going to finish Undertale." That's how it goes. You got to do it, guys. But yeah, basically my idea there was just, you know, finishing Undertale goes beyond beating the game. It goes beyond data mining. It goes beyond understanding who W.D. Gaster is by watching MatPat videos. It's this thing where Toby Fox is always going to be one step ahead of us, and therefore we will never truly beat the game. We will never surpass the game, I guess you could say. Because no matter how many times you beat it, no matter how many times you use save editors or whatever, there's always some little message from Toby Fox saying, I knew you were going to do this and I accounted for it. You haven't bested me yet, gaming community. So I just think that's a really clever way of kind of working everything that a game can be into your core point.
I like it as well, because obviously we get so few things nowadays genuinely new, because we know movies are coming along far before we see the trailer. Same with a lot of music or comparable media, and it's a shame that a lot of, say, secrets in games rarely ever stay secrets, particularly with the example that you linked, where it's essentially a audio file of Toby Fox and a character saying, please do not leak this on the internet, like, don't spoil it, guys. Like, some secrets are meant to be kept and save it for those few who just enjoy it. But on the flip side, is that just gatekeeping? Who knows?
Well, see, here's the thing is, there's educational value to that stuff. Like, what I do, and I've talked about this before, in fact, my first beginner's guide video 2 years ago, before I remade it and had a completely different opinion, was basically really critical of myself, because I'm like, okay, in my MGS2 video, I established that I think that the creator's perspective on a work of art is basically worthless in terms of understanding what it means, because art is subjective, art's a mirror, like I said earlier, and what matters more is your opinion on it. And so every time some asshole like me goes and gives you a deep explanation of what a work of art means to me, I am tainting your experience of it and sort of undermining how little it can mean, or how much it can mean to you. I'm undermining it. But I've sort of moved away from that because, again, I do think it's educational, and I think it's important that I establish to people who like play games, don't really care about this stuff, that they can think about it like this, and they can genuinely learn important ass lessons about who they are and how they process things and just how they think from playing games, the same as they can with books or movies or whatever. Like, yeah, okay, I've undermined Metal Gear Solid 2 by doing a video on it, but I've also opened a whole lot of people's minds to a new way of thinking about games, or not a new way, but just a different way. And I know that sounds incredibly egotistical, but I live in a small town, but I've never seen anybody thinking like this or talking about these things like this. Pretty much the only guy I've ever seen who does like anything like what I do is the man who actually inspired me to get into YouTube, Noah Caldwell-Gervais.
Do you think then by sharing kind of these experiences and what you do on the internet, there's a greater access to the kind of pretty niche community that enjoys narrative games in this manner? It's allowed you essentially to socialize outside of your hometown. It
has, definitely. I mean, I said in my 100k subscribers video that, like, again, I grew up in a small town. Like, all my gaming buddies, they just grew up, like, doing, like, literally 360 quickscope death matches on, like, Rust and Modern Warfare 2. And, this thing has sort of, I've always felt like I do about games for as long as I can remember, that they're this deep thing that needs to be thought about seriously. But I never met anybody like that. But when I hit my 100K sub milestone and made that video, it's like, okay, here's 100,000 people who think similarly about this stuff, and that just made me feel like less lonely than I ever have in my life. It's a crazy thought. And then on the Discord server, I mean, Discord's more oriented towards younger people, so there are like a lot of kids who just want to meme and stuff, which that's fine, but I mean, there's a bunch of those there too, and it's like, wow, here's actual people who like want to talk with me about the deeper meaning of games, and that's like something I never thought I'd have.
I think it says a lot about the amount, I guess, simply that you have to offer on the matter, because it's complicated stuff. I mean, one of my favorite examples is everybody was aware, everything from reviewers to very young gamers, right, that there was something off narrative-wise about Dishonored 2. It wasn't just the tech, it wasn't just the bad launch. We knew that there was something weird with it. It did not live up to the first, but people really struggled to put their finger on it. And even back at the time, I read a lot of reviews. People really struggled to put their finger on it. And then you came out with a half an hour video explaining. I believe the title was Dishonored 2: Missing the Magic, and you nailed precisely what it was lacking.
Yeah, I mean, I got this thing where it feels like I kind of bullshit my way through a lot of my essays. Like, I don't even do second drafts most of the time. And I kind of hated that at first. I did all my first ideas, which I loved and I've been thinking about for years, so those weren't really scuffed at all. But later on, like, basically over the last 2 years, it kind of feels like just about every script I wrote had like a little bit of bullshitting. And I don't mean lying, I just mean not having it really planned out from the get-go. I would have like a sort of word cloud of what I wanted to talk about, but I wouldn't really know how I'd tie it all together. And then just through writing, I would figure it out. And I guess that's what I call bullshitting. But that's sort of, in a way, if you ask me, makes it more pure. Because again, these videos are about me. These videos are about like how I was affected and what I learned about myself through these games. And planning out what you're going to learn about yourself is not in the spirit of that at all. But with the Dishonored thing, that's one of those not so artsy videos where I'm just getting to the nitty gritty, talking about mechanics, trying to be more critical about what makes something fun or not fun. And that was really just a result of like Dishonored 1 is easily in my top 10 games of all time. I've played it 50 times at least. I know that game like better than I know my family's house. And so while I also had a very, very, very hard time for years trying to figure out what exactly wasn't clicking with me about Dishonored 2, even though it's a great game, I just eventually stumbled upon it. And it was just this broad level design thing where the player's experience is not railroaded at all to the point of feeling completely void of intentions or like a way to play that makes it the most fun or makes it the most smooth or the most coordinated. It just feels and I mean, I guess I'm just going over what I said in the video summarizing it, but it just feels like not memorable because no decision has any more weight than any other decision, which is kind of a consequence of open world design in general, if you ask me. It's like I said in my second ever video about Far Cry 3.
Okay, so that's something very much on the kind of technical analysis side of things. Let's go back to when you were talking about the kinds of friends and the social circles that this kind of thing opened up to, and you actually quoted in one of your videos that a line that you often say to your friends is go through life as if you're going for the good ending. Would you like to chat about that a little more? Because I think it's a very good quote.
Yeah, sure. When I was very young, which I don't even consider this an RPG anymore, but the first RPG I ever played was Fallout 3. And this was like one of the first times I ever had like a quote-unquote deep thought for a game. Granted, it was deep for a 12-year-old, but whatever. But I was just thinking like, okay, so you're telling me even if I don't have like a strong character, I can talk my way through this, or I can lockpick my way through this, or sneak my way through this, or whatever. Okay, I guess anybody can sort of go through life as long as they have the right play style, or whatever, no matter what their skills are. That's like a 12-year-old's thought. It's whatever. But this eventually sort of cascaded into, like, you know, every time I'm playing a game where I'm, like, going for the good ending, I'm just a fucking angel. Like, I'm donating to the poor. I'm not taking, like, rewards for the jobs I do. I'm always, like, just being so nice, never, like, bigoted or anything. No matter what, I'm just doing what is the obviously good guy option. And I'm just like, well, why not just do that in real life, too? Like, it'll make you feel pretty fucking good about yourself. It's as simple as that, really. It's not like any grand, profound thing. Do the thing that's, like, obviously the right thing to do, as if it was a binary choice in a poorly written video game, and things will work out for you. If nothing else, you'll feel pretty good on your deathbed, which is enough for me.
And you said it's not profound. I think it's immensely profound because... what is it? My main man, Jean-Paul Sartre, he said, "We are our choices." I think the world's a better place for it, surely, in most cases.
Yeah, if you say so. For me, it's just like, I don't know, you know, when I'm playing a game like Dishonored, and obviously a game with, like, very basic morals, but I'm going for a good guy playthrough, it's like, okay, I'm not going to kill this guard, I want to be a pacifist. It would be easier to kill the guard, sure, but that's not the playthrough I'm doing. And in real life, that's not the playthrough I'm doing, so it's like, okay, I can put myself through a little bit more hassle, but ultimately the rewards will be worth it, because I'll feel better about myself, and if I'm having a crappy day, I can just think about all the guards I didn't kill in real life, the real life equivalent, that's where the metaphor breaks down a bit. But I can just think about all the guards I didn't kill, and feel good about myself. Whereas, if I'm a dickhead and I'm having a bad day, all I'm thinking is, oh yeah, I deserve this. So, I don't know, that's like one of the first... I feel like important lessons that video games taught me, and not any particular video game, just video games as a whole.
I think there's perhaps some value in choice-based games in opening up, particularly young people in any slice of life who perhaps hasn't experienced that much serious consequence to their actions. I mean, what's the biggest thing that happens when you're 12 or 13? I don't know, maybe you get in trouble at school, maybe you get a detention. But to experience worlds where actually your decisions have actual impact on the lives around you, I think it's surely largely a good thing, young people being exposed to the idea of consequences to their actions on a major scale.
Absolutely, and I mean, like, I don't know about you, maybe I'm just, like, sociopathic or whatever, but when I was that age, I didn't feel guilty about anything. I could do whatever I wanted, and I would never feel guilt. That's not how being an adult works. Like, you feel remorse for your actions if you're a dickhead as an adult, and just having a game call you a dickhead for being one at a young age, sort of like, I know it sounds weird, but it kind of made me realize that, like, that's what I was in for. If I kept on being a dickhead, I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna feel like a dickhead when I'm older. I don't want that. Like, yeah, I still vape. Like, yeah, I drank for years, and I still eat really unhealthily. That's all fine. I don't want to hate being in my own head, though, you know?
Well, it's interesting because your video on Silent Hill very much kind of analysed this idea of karma being real, but not as an external factor, quite the opposite of being entirely internal, of regardless or not other people knew of things that you had done or not done. The karma is an internal torture that will catch up to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of how I've always felt about it. I'm an atheist, and I don't believe in, like, anything metaphysical. Like, I don't believe if I hold the door open for people, someone else is going to hold the door for me or whatever. But if I hold the door for everybody I meet, when I walk into Walmart and see a bunch of people who, let's be real, are probably disgusting humans, I don't see them that way. I don't see them that way. I see them as potential door holders, you know? It gives me, if I'm a good person, it gives me an optimism about humanity that I sure as hell didn't have when I was younger. I mean, fucking thanks to the wall right here, every single person I knew thought I was going to be a shooter. I kid you not. I was very, very, very cynical, and now that I'm just treating my fellow man with respect, I am way less cynical, and that is a very, very, very valuable feeling.
Why do you think, if you don't mind me asking, why do you think you were cynical when you were younger, and where do you think the change kind of occurred?
I was a real loner growing up, and, I mean, that's fine. That's what made me so comfortable in my head, where, like, I'm fine being this open about myself. And this sort of led to, like, the typical nice guy attitude, where, like, everyone's a jerk, every girl is a thought. I mean, I guess we didn't say thought back then, but you get me. Like, everyone's just sheep. That's the way I always viewed it. Everyone around me is sheep, and I'm the only one who gets it, because everyone else listens to One Direction, but I'm listening to Pink Floyd. Man, the government's a sham for some reason. All that crap. Like, basically, I love Pink Floyd. The Wall's still my favorite album of all time. But they did me a little dirty between them and Nirvana. I really came out just this cynical little shit who just hated everyone. And I mean, that's why I flunked my ass through school. I just couldn't care less about anything because I thought everything was bullshit. And I mean, a lot of stuff's still bullshit. There's many things I'm still very cynical about, but largely speaking, I'm optimistic about the world and humanity and all that. And I guess that sort of happened when I started smoking pot. Like, I'm not here to endorse 16-year-olds going out and getting high every day, but that's what I did. And it gave me this sort of devil-may-care attitude that I've held on to since I stopped. Because it was like, oh, wow, you're telling me all I need to turn a crappy day into a good one is just like $5 worth of pot and some time to myself? Hell yeah. And then I sort of realized all I need to turn a crappy day into a good day is just some time to myself. And, I don't know, it made me think less critically about people, which again, I'm big on not thinking about things critically because we're not that important. We don't need critical opinions on things as individuals. If I was the president, it'd be a different story, but I'm just some fucking guy. Like, I do not need to be right about everything. I can just say things that make me feel good and think thoughts that make me feel good, and it's not like anyone else will ever be affected by that, so why not?
I think 200,000 people are very positively affected by what you have to say, so...
Well, still, it's not like, it's not like if I go out and say that, like, I don't know, I can't think of anything to say that wouldn't be political, but if I go out and have some opinion about something that is, like, factually correct and is, like, awful as an individual, like something that's frowned upon but is factually correct, I don't know. I'll give you an example. I'm in a position to say this. Say I went and this is not my opinion, but say I went and said something about, like, how transgendered people should be very fucking careful because of that 41% suicide rate or whatever. Say I went to talk about that. That is a statistic that will personally never impact my life because I'm just not that important. So I don't need to be thinking about that when I look at a transgendered person. It's like, who cares? They're just one person. I'm not looking at the whole of humanity here. I'm looking at one person. I'm not going to look at this one person and say, oh, there's a 41% chance they're going to commit suicide. That doesn't matter to me. That doesn't matter to them. If I was the president, that might matter, but I'm not that important, so why burden myself with thoughts that make me fucking sad that I will never be able to do anything about?
When you say you're not that important, who's the judgment there? Is that, like, in comparison to what? Because obviously in your measurement there, the president's important.
Well, in comparison to the scale itself. I mean, like, I have 200,000 subs on YouTube, right? The town I live in has 3,000 people. On YouTube, sure, there's 200,000 people who listen to the shit I say. In my town, though, I'm not the mayor. I'm not making any important decisions that affect anyone's life except mine and, like, 5 people around me. So it's not like I need to worry about crime statistics or whatever. You know, it's not like I have to look at, like, a poor person and think, oh, they're more likely to rob for me because this big fucking number that I can't even wrap my head around says they are. They're just a person, and I have, like, the power of judgment and observation. I'm not dealing with that many people in my real life, and so I don't need to look at it as a matter of percentages and statistics. You're a person, I'm a person, we can just be people. I don't need to burden myself with all that because there's nothing I will do in my life unless I become president, which I sure as hell don't want to. That where those statistics will matter. So I'm not going to say I'm not an important person, but on the scale of crime statistics and, like, suicide rates and stuff, I'm not an important person. You're weighing me against the whole of America or whatever.
Well, let have for president. Well, it's interesting because you mentioned the trans statistics, and of course that's something you touched upon on your recent video as well. Would you like to chat a little bit about that? Because I think firstly I'll say sorry. The undoubtedly positive impact that is both seen and unseen in your comment section from people who are not yet confident or feel safe enough to be out in terms of exploring their identity in that kind of manner. So I think there's undoubtedly huge positive impacts that go unseen and unrecognized in your comment section.
Yeah, I really think it was important that I do that. And for anyone who doesn't know, in my 200k subscribers video, it was called like making a video out of my first script and then opening up about myself. At the end, I came out as trans questioning, hence the wig I was wearing in the beginning and the obviously stuffed bra and all that. So that's what he's talking about. I just sort of felt like there were multiple reasons it was important for me to do this, and I touched on it in the video, but I hate these words, but as an influencer in a minority situation, I think it's kind of important for me to wear it on my sleeve, because I myself, my parents are very loving, they're very accepting of this, but I was still hiding this shit for 5-6 fucking years before I ever told anyone about it, and I know how much that fucking sucks, and so I think it's important for someone who a lot of people watch to say, like, yeah, this is me, it's fine, I'm valid, you're valid too, we're all valid, let's not worry about this so much, let's be more open about this, because fear is how XYZ phobes win. So I just, that was a big part of it. It's like, I have the Instagram where I talk about it, and that whole Instagram is dedicated to just like, oh, here's the first razor I found that really worked on my legs and was like quick and easy to use or whatever. Stuff like that, just genuinely helpful, practical advice for people in this situation. But it's like, oh, okay, I'll talk about that there where I have 200 followers, but on the main channel where it's 1,000 times that? Fuck no. That would be such a shitty way of looking at it. Like, for me to say, yeah, be yourself, but only when a couple people can see it. That's awful. That's completely hypocritical and contrary to every feeling I have about this. So I just thought it was really important to do that, even though it's not all that relevant to my content. And the other reason is just, as I said, I'm trans questioning. I'm trying to figure out how I feel and how I like. So if I'm comfortable talking to, sitting on the biggest pedestal I will ever sit on and saying this stuff, then I'm really comfortable with it, and I know that there's something to this, and it's not as much of a phase as maybe it was. At this point, I'm pretty confident it's not, and it's just a matter of time before I transition, but we'll see.
And I think it's nice as well that it's okay to be within that questioning stage of not defining into any one. It doesn't, people are not forced to fit immediately with any sort sense of immediacy into a particular one. It is acceptable to be questioning for people who are not quite there yet and who are still figuring stuff out. And I mean,
it's important to feel that way, because this is like, if I ever decide to transition, and this goes for everybody who does, that's like pretty much the biggest decision I'll make in my entire life. I mean, short of getting married or having kids, like, it does not get much more drastic than that, and that is something that is more or less permanent, depending on how far you take it. And, I've seen a lot of people who, as soon as they come out as trans or whatever, they just instantly, like, if you're a male to female, they just instantly abandon their masculine side and try to become like Belle Delphine or something. Or the other side of that, like, they go from like, if they're a female to male, they just instantly become like a fucking lumberjack. And I'm like, you had a feminine side and a masculine side before this, just like every human. So if you aren't comfortable in that questioning phase and just jump from one extreme to the other, you lose a part of your personality through your transition. And I think that is so sad. Like, the whole point of this thing is to be yourself, and abandoning yourself so that you can be more like the thing you were missing. To me, that just says that you rushed it and you didn't have time to question, which I know that's presumptuous. Everyone's situation is different, but that's sort of the big thing I've been very aware of and like trying to watch out for is, okay, I start painting my nails, whatever. That's one thing. But if it gets to the point where it's like everywhere I go, it's just like, oh my god, yes, like I'm just being a caricature, just trying to be as femme as possible about everything, then I've lost a part of myself. I have a masculine side too. Everyone does, man or woman, trans or cis. Like, you don't want to abandon your personality in pursuit of a part of your personality you didn't get to express, is I guess the best way to put it.
Forgive me as it's not a game, but you not a video game. I should add. Sorry, you did a very good video about gender roles in regard to Fight Club, which is traditionally only kind of critically explored in regards to masculinity. But that one, you spoke about both gender roles in that.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the first time I ever brought up these ideas about losing a part of your personality in a transition or in pursuit of fitting into your gender, assigned or otherwise. I just think that as someone who, like, at the time, nobody knew this, but at the time, I was thinking about gender stuff a lot. It's a message that applies to both genders perfectly well. It's just, in this instance, they use man. And they use, the stereotypes and the zeitgeist archetypes or whatever of men, fighting, drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, living in some shitty house, having sex with some girl, like she says in the fucking movie, nobody's fucked me like that since grade school or something. Like, it's all about just being a hyper masculine. But the same thing can go for women too. I mean, like I said, it would be basically the same movie if it was all female characters and it was called Book Club, just with a very different tone.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Oh man, okay. Well, let's then do a little segue. Then I'm debating to go between two things. Tell you what, let's do the shirt first, because that is a hell of a shirt you're wearing. I'm a big fan of it.
Oh yeah, this is my merch. New merch dropping soon. This is from the first drop, but we've got some very cool stuff. We got a poster up there, a phone case over there that I will not bother to show. They're on my Twitter. You can see them there. But yeah, that's happening soon. I'm gonna have my own website and everything. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, let's jump into, of course, the show My First 1,000 is all about how and why YouTubers got started. And before we get on to kind of the main growth, you've spoken a bit about your original intentions with the channel, but if you just kind of if you could kind of rehash the first couple of months of the videos you were making, what were your intentions when you got started?
Well, like I said, I don't mean to call out the friend in question, but during my stoner years, which was like 4 years of just smoking pot every day, never sober, it was just me and this guy I gamed with, and he was the friend I was talking about when I said he was raised on like 360 no scope DMs on Modern Warfare 2 Rust, and it was just me and him smoking pot and playing video games every day. And I remember one day, I was like, dude, you gotta play this game Prey, it's so cool. Knowing him now, it's totally not his type of game, and that's fine. But I got him to play it, and he just wasn't thinking about it the same way I was. He was like, he wasn't like reading the signs and stuff to know where he was. He would be like halfway through a quest and not know what his objective was, just following the quest markers and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just, I'm like, all right, that's a kind of standard way of thinking about games, and I think that is such a boring way of thinking about them, when if you do just take that extra step and get really immersed and really pay attention and invest yourself in the story, you get such a rich experience that like nobody's talking about. And basically the point of the channel at the beginning, and to a lesser degree now, is letting people know, like, hey, there's nothing cringe about like getting really invested in a game and like really caring about it. You're going to have a fantastic experience as a result. And the first video I ever did was on Prey, and I was talking about the meta narrative there, which you can go watch the video. And it was kind of just, hey, look at these things and take them super seriously, because they were made by people who really, really, really care more than you ever could. And if you can tap into some of that, you will have like some of the richest experiences in your life. I've had richer experiences with games than I have with any movie, any book, any album, or anything. Like, games are fucking special if you really treat them with the respect they deserve, and that's sort of what it was always about, was just showing people how to treat them with respect, I guess. And yeah, showing people how to treat them with respect, and showing people that it's fun and rewarding to do so.
Okay. In regard to, you mentioned your friend not stopping to read the signs. I would say there's a consistent downward trend over the past couple of decades where games such as Half-Life 2 do not really at all hold your hand in terms of how they tell the story. And progressively, we've kind of seen more and more hand-holding in the terms of quest markers and waypoints, as you describe. And I worry that there's kind of a decline in which the richness, I guess one could argue, of these narrative games is left to the player to figure out. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do, to a certain degree. See, the reason something changes, obviously, like in any, progressive art form, is that there was something wrong with it. And while System Shock 2 is one of my favorite games, Thief 2 is one of my favorite games, I play Dishonored with the quest markers turned off and all that, there is something fundamentally wrong with the idea of not forcing someone to pay attention, but forcing people to sort of just trial and error. Because a game like Thief 2, or Dishonored, or Prey, you can really pay attention and you will never be left scratching your head as to what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. But that's not how it went with the majority of the games that came out at that time. Like in the late 90s, everyone knows the stereotype about 90s games is you are going to have to use a walkthrough at one point or another. And I think that's more an example of like games that don't really get it sort of pissing in the tub, like spoiling it for everyone, pissing in the pool, I guess. Where, yeah, okay, a game creator as fucking genius as like Harvey Smith, he can make a game that gives you very little direction and you still know what to do because you were paying attention. Game creators that aren't quite as talented, no, they can't do that. And while the really talented game creators still can and still do, in cases like Prey, which only came out in 2017, they're still making those games, except now everyone's been accustomed to waypoints, so they have those included, but you can turn them off and still understand it and still know what to do and still not get lost. But, not every game creator is Harvey Smith. You need sort of a simpler format that's easier to understand, because I don't want to say less talented game creators, but less talented game creators can't deliver that same consistency and same immersion that allows you to go without UI elements and still play the game, richly and thoroughly. So I think ultimately it's a good thing that we've sort of normalized mini-maps and quest markers and, journals that tell you exactly what your objectives were in case you weren't paying attention. Because while there are exceptions, again, most creators don't have the talent to make a quest that you get invested in and could not possibly forget the objective to. And it just isn't sustainable. There aren't enough talented game creators to have a gaming ecosystem where every game is this big, thought-provoking piece where you gotta really pay attention to get it. So, for the sake of having more games to play, which is always a good thing, I think it's good that we've moved towards more hand-holding. But, there's extremes on both ends. Games that don't give you nearly enough hand-holding and games that give you way too much. I think something like Half-Life 2 sort of rides the line perfectly because there's no quest markers or anything, just really, really smart level designers with tons and tons and tons of playtesting, so you don't get lost, but you don't feel like your hand is being held that much either. And that's just another reason Half-Life 2 is, objectively, if you ask me, one of the best games ever made.
So, when you started, you were doing pretty consistent videos along this kind of strand of thinking. And you had kind of the low hundreds in subscribers at the time. And then you had one, which I believe was a TF2 video, which was the first kind of, the hit virality. There's a little bit of a story with what happened with that.
Yeah, I'm surprised you even know about that. So basically, I was at 300 subscribers, and I put up this video called Team Fortress 2 is coming back. That's the worst case of clickbaiting I've ever done. What I meant by that is Creators TF gives me that same experience I've heard so many stories about what Team Fortress 2 was like before the Meet Your Match update, which added casual, and before the game went free to play, which added mountains and mountains of noobs who don't really care about the game. And basically, it taught me to be cautious of something in my writing that I was not thinking about before, and that is that people are going to assume the worst out of you no matter what, period. Whether you're on the internet or whatever, people are going to assume the worst. So if you're not considering the worst when you're writing a script, you're probably going to say something that sounds pretty bad out of context. And in the case of that video, this opinion is so not mine, and it was so far off my mind that I wasn't even on the lookout for it, and that's the lesson I learned. But I really gave off the energy of someone who just hated new players and thought they had no place in Team Fortress 2, which obviously that's not the case. You need new players to keep the game from dying, and I want to see new players get better and all that. But what I was saying is, it's kind of good that there's a slight barrier to entry to Creators TF, because casual's still out there. More people than ever are still playing the public servers. But on Creators TF, it's like, okay, only someone who like really likes Team Fortress 2 is going to be playing on these servers. And the result of that is you don't get... You get like a really wholesome, genuine slice of like TF2 community culture, in a way, where it's not like a bunch of people who are only playing the game because it's free or in your server, and I don't care if they're bad or whatever. It's just that they aren't really a part of the conversation we've been having for all this time. I know this sounds so gatekeepy, which is what everybody said, but again, it's like, I just had a great time on those servers because I could trust my teammates to understand how the game is played. You know, you never see snipers running around with the SMG because it's the only automatic weapon that you can run with, and they think instantly that makes it the best gun in the game, or anything like that. It's like, okay, here's a medic who's healing me, and he's like looked at me and we've locked eyes and I'm a demo man or a soldier or something. I could be confident he's going to ubercharge me and we can go have a great moment because of that. Whereas on casual, who the fucking knows what the medic's going to do, you know? I know we're talking more about specific things that are only relevant to people who play the game, but it just gave me this great sense of community that I've never really had in Team Fortress 2 before, where it's like, everyone here loves TF2, and that's not something you can get in casual. But of course, if I'm not looking at the script from that perspective, or if I'm only looking at the script from that perspective, I completely miss out on the fact that this kind of makes it sound like I just hate new players. And so that video, because I clickbaited it so hard, got like 200,000 views, which is still a pretty good view count for a Leadhead video to this day, even though I was at 300 subs at the time. And that got me up to 600 subs. It was the biggest boom I'd ever seen. But all the comments were so fucking negative, and I just didn't want to have a video out there that was promoting a toxic view, even if I didn't mean it to, and that's not my view. It was still promoting a toxic view, so that was the first video I've ever taken down. Taken down 2 others since then. Not gonna get into it, it's not interesting. But yeah, that's where I got like my first ever quote-unquote boom from, and that was like a big moment for me, because that's sort of part of how I toughened my skin a little bit, which is very important if you're going to be in the public eye like this. It made me not really care if I got a million evil comments, or misunderstanding comments, I should say, not evil. But yeah, I mean, that was just a valuable lesson for me in multiple ways. 1, I need to look at my script through the eyes of a cynic, and 2, I need to not let negative comments get to me, because they're always going to be there. And I was very bad at taking criticism in the beginning. It's not like I was out there arguing with people online or anything, but it would just like crush my motivation. You know, I could read like 100 really, and still to this day to a certain degree, I can read like 500 positive comments and be like, hell yeah, feeling good. Read 1 negative comment and it's all I'm thinking about for the next like 10 minutes. It used to be all I'd think about for the next like month, so I've gotten a lot better.
Seeing your comment section, it seems very much in terms of the upper echelons of positivity as a subscriber base goes, though. There does seem to be very much on the positive side. Well, let's then talk about that one hell of a week that you had, I believe around June or July last year, where you then went from 600 subscribers to 100,000 subscribers in the space of, what was it, one week or 1 month?
2 weeks to... I mean, the boom sort of kept on past 100,000 subs, so let's just say in less than a month, I went from 600 subscribers to about 140, which I'm sure it's happened. Like maybe Wayne's Radio TV, something like that happened too, after the sentient AI thing went so big. But I've never heard of it. I've never personally witnessed it, so from my perspective, that's like completely unprecedented. And it was fucking insane. Like, I was still at a point where, like, the Discord server was like dead as hell. Nobody was there. Naturally, it was a channel with 600 subs. Of course, there's going to be like 30 people in the Discord. And then just instantly, in the span of 1 month, I'm like turning on shit to make it so I don't get notifications when somebody sends me a message on Discord. I'm turning on shit so I don't get like any notifications for anything, because it is just the most overwhelming experience of my entire life to suddenly have so many people trying to send me DMs. And even if they're positive ones, which they pretty much have all been, it's just like, I don't know. When I see a positive DM, I appreciate it, obviously, but that puts pressure on me in a way. It's like, I always say that like creative work is a constant battle against your own ever-declining ego, and seeing people appreciate your work and say that it's great just sort of makes the enemy there bigger. It's like, oh, here's this even bigger image of myself I have to stand up to and live up to. And obviously, again, I really appreciate every positive comment and DM and all that, but when I was getting so many of them, which it's all slowed down by now because that boom, like I don't get nearly as many daily subs as I did during that boom. It was like 10,000 a day at the time. So way less new people seeing the channel, way less DMs coming in, but when it was that many, I swear to God, it was like a panic attack that I was so thankful to be having. It was a very weird part of my life. But it's just, I don't know, it was like constant pressure to always be my absolute best, which nobody can do. I mean, I'm vaping on this, took the wig off, I'm surprised I haven't coughed yet, but nobody can just be like Superman all the time. That's not how it works. But when you see so many people constantly throughout the day telling you you're great or whatever, I know this is like fucking first world problems out the ass or whatever, but when you see that so hard, it's like, oh geez, I really gotta live up to this? Fuck that. I scratch my ass just like everyone else. They don't want to see that. Like, it was a lot of pressure. But it's better. Again, that's another case where my skin is toughened up. Now I can look at like, oh, I got 5 DMs today and be like, all right, cool, whatever. Which I don't mean to sound dismissive, but it's like, whatever, as opposed to, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god. It's definitely a healthier way of thinking about it.
Yeah, because there's no time either for an adjustment period in terms of scaling.
Yeah. That's what it was just 0 to 100 instantly, and I was not prepared.
Yeah, that sounds very, very tricky. Well, something that you've mentioned in terms of mental health and keeping positivity is you actually had a routine you've mentioned before of taking your guitar and going out and driving nearby. So would you like to tell us a little bit about this kind of ritual that you have?
No, I'm not doing it so much this time of year because it's winter, but the other part of that ritual, which I don't really talk about that much, is that I just fucking love driving. It's just my thing. It's not like I'm a car nut. I don't know shit about how my car works. It's a jalopy. It's falling apart. But just driving is just so important to me. I mean, when I was having my vertigo, which has gotten a whole lot better since I started with the trans stuff and moved out and all that. But when I was having my vertigo, I literally couldn't sit in the kitchen and talk to my mom for 5 minutes without feeling like I had to go lay down. But I could go and drive for like 4 hours and be totally fine. Which, I mean, if anything is going to give me motion sickness, it should be driving, right? But I'm just so at peace there that it didn't. So, during the winter months, that's kind of how I do my ritual. I just drive around. I go to a coffee shop. Not a coffee shop. I go to a fucking gas station, a 24/7 gas station. Grab my 3 a.m. coffee, just like I did tonight. And just cruise for a bit, drink my coffee, and just take myself out of it all. Because that was the whole point of the guitar thing, is it's like, it's a reminder that no matter how big this thing gets, no matter how depressed I get or whatever the fuck happens in the rest of the world, I can still just retreat to my little bubble and just be happy. And that's what the driving thing is too. So it's always been about making a part of my life not be centered around YouTube, because it feels like everything else I do is. I mean, when I'm having a bad day, like I'm stressed out about YouTube stuff or whatever, what I do very often is I get in my car and I record a vlog that never gets uploaded, but I don't treat it like that. I'm like, you know, you guys have been watching me for a while. If you're seeing this, like, you know, yada, 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 even though I'm just talking to myself. Or when I write my journals, which I don't do too often, I write them in the form of scripts. It's like everything in my life is YouTube. And everything in my life is YouTube except for going out to the baseball diamond and playing guitar, and except for going on my little coffee runs and driving around. It's just an escape from the monotony, I guess, as weird as it is to call something like this monotonous. It's an escape from that. It's a chance to think about something else, to like check in with myself that I don't really get to do normally, even though my work is so personal. It's like I kind of lose touch with myself if I don't do that. I'd run out of material in a week if I didn't.
I'd imagine as well being able to, I guess, the independence of taking that drive, you know, being alone out there, particularly at that kind of time, that coffee must taste bloody fantastic. Like, that must be the personification of hitting different, you know?
It's garbage gas station coffee. In fact, the reason I drink it is because my good coffee at home is too strong and I get the jitters. But it's like, it's just become part of my tradition. Just go to the gas station, get the coffee from like the same 2 cashiers every night, and then just be alone with the shitty coffee and just enjoy it. And I don't know, it's, for me, coffee is just like about as spiritual as I ever get. I'm like, a good cup of coffee can change your fucking day, change your life even. And any coffee will do if the mood is right, and that's the mood, and the crappy coffee is part of that mood. I don't know, it's very vague, pretentious art student shit, but it helps me a lot, I know that. I mean, it's been a long time since I didn't have my nightly gas station coffee.
You've probably played Life is Strange, I just wanted to check that you had.
Yeah.
Awesome, okay. In which case then, I think there's something, if you'll excuse the stereotype, immensely American about the experience of driving a truck, seeking independence, and kind of escaping adolescence and maturity that we often find both in real life and in media such as Life is Strange, in driving your trucks out there and around the world. I think there are 2 main games, Life is Strange and the Telltale series, that at the end of a huge choice-based narrative, it offers you a percentage of how many other players chose the same as you did, which I think is a very interesting mechanic in terms of the gratification and kind of satisfaction we get at evaluating our choices against other people. I don't know how you feel about those mechanics.
That's an interesting question. That was not on my radar. The way I've never really thought about it too much. I sort of always just dismiss it as like, okay, this is just like a thing for Twitter posters or whatever. I kind of think that's what it is, though, because for me, again, art is a mirror. Art is about you, the observer, and the choices you make in a Walking Dead game, or Telltale's Walking Dead, I should say, or Life is Strange or whatever. They are there to tell you about yourself, you know, more than they are to tell you about the characters or whatever. That's there so that you can see how you think, in a way. And I kind of think the statistic thing totally undermines that. Like, I don't want to see that shit. I just want it to be like, I want to be focused on what I did. I don't want to think about like what Chad did or Stacy. I just want to be thinking like, if it showed me what decisions I made, which it does, I'd be like, okay, there's a good chance to like go over the lessons, I guess you could say. But in the case of the statistics, I'm like, who gives a shit? Like, I don't care about that. I don't care that like many people disagree with me on this issue. I care about why I decided that choice. And I really, like I said, it was kind of just a dismissive thought, but I kind of think it's fair to say that for me, at least in my view, that is pretty much just there for the purposes of people who want to tweet about it, which is obviously a very important part of a game's hype cycle and marketing, is Twitter and people getting excited about sharing their decisions. But yeah, I mean, if I could have it my way, and if money was no object and nobody cared how many people played their game, I would not include that.
Perhaps it's something they should consider as a toggle. Would you like to see? Because what you said there, I'd never considered, which is that you didn't want to see it. Because I guess that kind of reflects real life, is you don't get the confirmation as to what the other path would have been.
Yeah, because I mean, again, you know, it's not about the work of art, it's about me. I don't care about how people as a whole responded to it. I care about how I responded to it, because that's what I'm here to learn about. Every time anyone's looking at any art, you know, I don't watch The Shining to learn about Stanley Kubrick. I watch it to learn about me. You know, I was watching The Shining with a friend one time, and I watched him recover a memory of his father, which obviously we were watching The Shining. It was not a good memory. He wasn't fucking thinking about Stanley Kubrick's intentions when that happened. He was thinking about his life, and he had a very powerful moment that he was delivered because of that fact, because he wasn't caught up about the work critically. He was caught up about what it meant to him.
God. I honestly think there's so few people on YouTube, at least in this space, that have as much emphasis as you do on how much it is about you. As you say, as a reflection that you're playing to learn about yourself. All the essays are about the character's intentions, but yeah, I think you've got something really important there.
I think that the critical way of looking at things has educational value, which is important. If you want a game that surpasses Thief 2, you need to be critical about Thief 2, or whatever. But again, it's like, I'm not a fucking game creator. I mean, I want to be, but 99% of my audience aren't game creators. Why should they really care about the critical aspects? Like, do your comments on, game trailers really matter that much? Do your Twitter arguments about why Far Cry 4 sucks really matter that much? No, you're not in a seat of authority. None of us really are. So why, kind of like what I was saying about like messy, ugly statistics, like why bog yourself down with critical thoughts when they're critical thoughts that don't matter to anybody and will never impact anything you do? Like, if you're a game creator and you want to go like say, to your team, this is what Far Cry 4 did wrong, go for it. But if you're just arguing about it on Twitter with people who like the game, what the hell are you doing? Like, let them like the game and then go figure out shit you like. Acknowledge that it has flaws if you want to, but don't let the flaws define it. Let the good qualities define it. And the good qualities are subjective, so look at it subjectively and you'll be happier, is the way I've always viewed it. I don't know. It's all very vague, metaphorical shit. Well,
no. It's
abstract shit. But it's, I don't know. It's brought me a lot of happiness. It's made me enjoy games that a younger me would have fucking hated, so must be something to it.
It's important to think about, and it's not simple to think about, which I guess is good, because, as you say, it forces introspection.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. You gotta be self-aware.
I guess we've run a little over time, so if it's okay, I guess we'll close then with one final little line of questioning, which is essentially about maturity. And we're going to examine kind of two, I think, immensely profound videos that you made, which was about the coffee shop and also about Earthbound. So games like this are focused on such a transformative time of maturation throughout puberty and that sort of thing, and the dramatic shifts in which we go through in those 2 years. What is the value, I guess, of being forced to confront these horrific changes to particularly audiences who are around that age?
I think it's super important, because when you're really young, you're feeling things way harder than you will in like the rest of your life. I mean, like, Disco Elysium, probably my favorite game of all time, is one of the only instances where I feel like I have felt something to the core in the same way I did when I was a child. When I was at like Disney World when I was like 8, they had this ride with like dinosaurs or something, and it was so loud and really fucking scary, and it fucked up the whole vacation for me. And like, there is that risk, but ultimately you got to capitalize on that. You are feeling things so hard when you're a kid, and that means you can learn the really important lessons through that feeling, So something like Earthbound, it is about a kid, slowly learning that the world is a pretty fucked up place, and through that learning, figuring out how to fortify themselves against it and not fucking blow their brains out the moment they hit 18. And I just think that scaring kids, as funny as this sounds, I think scaring kids is super important, because it teaches them to not be afraid, And it teaches them that there will be challenges in life, and it helps them not give up when they get to those challenges. I mean, I'll tell you right now, if I didn't play games that like were fucking scary and watched movies that were scary and shit when I was a kid, I would be way more spineless right now, which I'm already pretty spineless, but um, it it's just important to challenge kids. You don't want to coddle them too much. And I'm not saying go let your kids play Postal 2 or something. No adult should be playing that game. But if you coddle your kids, you're going to get some weak ass kids who like don't get passionate about things because they never got passionate about shit as a kid. They don't get invested in things. They aren't interesting. They're just fine riding the middle and just riding the wake. And that is so tragic to me, to set up a kid for a boring life. Like, the biggest turnoff for me in the world is someone who isn't passionate about shit, doesn't want to take chances, is just like a boring person with nothing to talk about. And you make boring people by giving them safe, boring childhoods. And all I know is that a child who had a really turbulent or exciting or interesting and varied life is probably going to have a more interesting adult life than the kid who, just rode the wave and wasn't exposed to anything scary. I mean, like, I remember the fucking Lego movie, obviously a kid's movie. I saw some asshole on Fox talking about how it was teaching kids to be a communist because the villain's name is like Mr. Business or something. And I'm like, one, quit pushing your fucking agenda on 6-year-olds. Two, you're just gonna act like everything is fine because there's kids here? Like, I think it's fucking despicable how I know, like, 6-year-old kids who know what a pedophile is. That's awful. But to not have the kid be challenged at all, to not expose them to anything scary, just means you are robbing them of some of the richest years of their life and setting them up to ultimately prefer safe, boring, lame, when there's so much more to be felt than that. You only get one life and you're really going to waste it on the familiar. I know that's a lot coming from me who's barely fucking left this room this week, but it scares kids away from challenging thoughts, and that's how you get boring people who seemingly don't care about anything beyond, like, the Lakers or whatever.
God. Yeah, I completely agree. That's wonderful. God.
Yeah, just prep your kids for the future. Give them challenges, because they're gonna fucking hate their life otherwise.
Yeah. The world is a very hard place. Very difficult place. Reminds me, there's a quote towards the end of the film Boyhood, which is essentially all about adolescence growing up. And he says, and the dad says to the kid, the older you get, the less you feel. Your skin gets tougher. And I think that's such a shame because, yeah, we feel our absolute extremes, certainly, throughout childhood, and everything just gets a bit duller, and the edges are dulled the older we get. And I think that's a shame in a lot of ways.
It does. And I mean, like, I played Earthbound for the first time when I was like 14. Which, I knew what, like, a hooker was at 14 or whatever. I knew about drugs and all that.
Legend.
And, like, alcoholics and all that. But, that game, I won't say it, like, scared me because I was 14. I'm too old to be scared by Earthbound. Other than Gygas, that shit's just creepy even now. But it sort of set me up to be like, wow, I can really feel shit because of these games. I know I'm young, so I'm feeling things more. It's not like I was thinking that at the time, but I was young, so I was feeling things more. But it set me up to allow myself to be vulnerable to myself. It's like, okay, I'm feeling big fucking thoughts when I'm watching Paula pray for the safety of her friends and the ending of Earthbound. And as a result of that, I became okay with feeling things. I was able to let my guard down, even though it was just a conversation between me and the game. I still had my guard up because I was young, I had my pride, and, especially the ending of Mother 3, when I'm fucking crying at a video game, I'm like, alright, I'm letting my guard down, and I'm feeling really special thoughts because of that. And if it wasn't for me having experiences like that at a younger age, I sure as hell wouldn't have, like, completely had, like, a mental breakdown, new awakening, self-discovery, incredible experience with, like, Death Stranding and Planescape Torment and Disco Elysium and all these games that have completely changed the way I think about my life as an adult. I would not let my guard down if that was the childhood I grew up with. But because I played these games that challenged me as a kid, mentally, I don't mean like mechanically or whatever, I'm able to let my guard down as an adult, and I've learned and I've become a smarter, happier, I'll just say better person because of it. Because I dropped some of my bullshit pride that wasn't doing me any good.
Well, I think you have completely proved the value of emotional introspection, and I think it is an immense shame a lot of people go through life without that.
It's important. It's all you got, really.
Yeah, it's scary to not self-examine and I guess check yourself is the phrase. But
yeah, I mean, like I said, and I don't mean to ramble, but like I said in that Disco Elysium video, like, your little ball is the only place you'll ever really inhabit. You know, you don't own anything but that. And if you aren't familiar with that space, someday you'll have nothing at all. As opposed to having nothing at all save for a comfortable room in your head.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us your thoughts, both introspective and, of course, critically about games. Thank you as well for sharing your journey as to how you've gone from 0 to 200k. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us, Leadhead.
Thank you. It's been a great time. And if I have one more, if I can get one more thing to say, investigate pork brain lore. There's a story there that nobody's picking up on. Every video is canon. Check it out.
Cheers. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.